Let's start here, because this matters. Most people who read or talk about Can't Hurt Me completely miss what the book actually is. They treat it like a hype manual, like it's supposed to fire you up, get you to do burpees at 4 in the morning, and yell "stay hard" at strangers. That's not really what this book is about. This book is about what happens when you remove your own excuses, one by one, until there's nowhere left to hide. And fair warning, that process is not fun, flattering, or particularly Instagram friendly. David Goggins isn't trying to motivate you, he's trying to confront you. And if you've ever had that quiet feeling that you're capable of more than you're currently giving, this book tends to hit a nerve. So as you're listening, don't worry about whether you like Goggins, agree with him, or want to live like him. That's not the point. The point is whether you recognize any of your own habits in what he describes. And if you do, just note it. You don't have to fix your entire life today. Awareness is enough for now. Also, quick housekeeping. If you enjoy these longer, honest breakdowns instead of surface-level summaries, hit like and subscribe. It helps more than you think, and it keeps this channel focused on the stuff that actually matters. All right, let's rewind to where this story really begins. Chapter 1. A childhood that didn't make him strong. There's a popular idea that hardship automatically builds character, that if you suffer early, you come out tougher, wiser, more resilient. Goggins' childhood is a good reminder that this is mostly nonsense. He grew up in a home defined by fear. His father was abusive, violent, and controlling. Physical punishment wasn't rare or exceptional. It was routine. Psychological pressure was constant. The house wasn't a place to recharge. It was a place to stay alert. And here's the important part that people gloss over. That environment didn't forge strength. It produced anxiety, anger, and avoidance. Goggins didn't grow up thinking, this is making me tougher. He grew up thinking, how do I survive this without drawing attention to myself? At school, things didn't magically improve. He had a serious learning disability and struggled to read. He fell behind early, and once you fall behind as a kid, it has a way of sticking to you. Teachers don't expect much. Other kids notice. You start to internalize the idea that you're just not very capable. By the time Goggins reached adulthood, he wasn't some hardened warrior. He was drifting, overweight, insecure, angry at the world, and quietly convinced that life had dealt him a bad hand. This matters because it sets up one of the book's core messages. Pain alone does not make you strong. Avoided pain makes you fragile. And for a long time, Goggins avoided confronting what his past had done to him. He carried it, but he didn't face it. Chapter 2. The moment the illusion breaks. Fast forward a few years. Goggins is working as an exterminator. Not exactly living a dream life, but also not actively fighting for something better. He's close to 300 pounds, eating terribly, smoking, and coasting in that dangerous middle zone where you're unhappy, but not unhappy enough to change. Then, one night, he watches a documentary about Navy SEAL training. Elite soldiers. Extreme conditions. People pushing far past what seems reasonable or comfortable. And something clicks. Not in a motivational way, in a deeply uncomfortable way. He realizes that these men didn't come from another planet. They didn't get handed a different brain or a different body at birth. They chose a harder standard, and then paid the price for it. And suddenly, Goggins can't avoid the comparison. It's not that he wants to be a SEAL. It's that he can no longer pretend his life is the result of circumstances alone. That's the moment that matters. Real change rarely begins with inspiration. It usually starts with embarrassment, shame, or disgust. That moment when you realize you've been selling yourself a story that doesn't quite hold up anymore. Goggins describes looking at himself and thinking, I did this. Not his parents. Not society. Not bad luck. Him. Most people run from that realization. He didn't. Chapter 3. Radical honesty minus the self-pity. This is where the book starts to separate itself from typical self-improvement advice. Goggins doesn't respond to his realization by repeating affirmations or telling himself he's enough. He doesn't start journaling about gratitude. He doesn't search for balance. He does something much less comfortable. He tells the truth. He stands in front of a mirror and forces himself to acknowledge who he actually is, not who he hopes to be or pretends to be. Overweight, undisciplined, angry, lazy, wasting potential. This becomes what he later calls the accountability mirror, a place where excuses don't get airtime. And here's why this matters for you. Even if you never plan on running ultramarathons or joining the military, most people want change without self-indictment. They want progress without admitting fault. They want results without ownership. Goggins flips that completely. He starts from the assumption that if his life isn't what he wants, he is the common denominator. Not as a moral judgment, but as a practical one. Because if you're the problem, you're also the solution. Quick pause here, because this is worth asking yourself honestly. If someone audited your daily habits, your routines, and how you actually spend your time, would your goals make sense? Or would they sound like a nice story you tell yourself? You don't need to answer out loud. Just notice the reaction you have. Chapter 4. Choosing hard things on purpose. Here's where Goggins does something that most people think is wild. He decides he wants to become a Navy SEAL. This is not a symbolic goal. It's very concrete, very measurable, and very tough. There's just one problem. Several, actually. He's severely overweight. He can barely run. He can't swim well. He can't do the required number of push-ups or pull-ups. And he gives himself a brutally short timeline to fix all of it. No gradual easing in, no waiting for perfect conditions, just a decision followed by action. He trains constantly, runs until his body starts breaking down, pushes through pain that most people would interpret as a clear sign to stop. And this is where a lot of people misread Goggins. He's not doing this because he enjoys pain. He's doing it because he understands something most people avoid. Motivation is unreliable. Discipline is not. If you only act when you feel ready or inspired, you are training yourself to quit the moment things get uncomfortable. Goggins trains the opposite habit. He acts first and lets motivation catch up later, if it shows up at all. Chapter 5. Callousing the mind. This idea is one of the most useful concepts in the entire book, and it applies far beyond fitness or extreme challenges. Goggins talks about callousing the mind. Just like your hands develop calluses through repeated friction, your mind toughens through repeated exposure to discomfort. Not chaos, not reckless self-destruction. Controlled, intentional difficulty. Cold showers when you don't want them. Workouts when you're tired. Waking up earlier than feels comfortable. Doing the thing you've been avoiding because it's awkward or hard. Each time you do this, you're sending your brain a signal. Discomfort is not dangerous. It's survivable. Most people stop as soon as things get uncomfortable, which means they never adapt. They never build tolerance. They never find out where their real limits actually are. Goggins goes far enough that pain loses some of its authority over him. Fear doesn't disappear, but it stops being the boss. And that's where confidence really comes from. Not positive thinking, but accumulated evidence that you can endure more than you thought. Chapter 6. Failure as tuition, not identity. Despite everything he puts himself through, Goggins doesn't just sail through SEAL training. He fails. Repeatedly. He gets injured, breaks bones, develops stress fractures, pushes his body to the edge of collapse. Most people would see this as a sign they're not cut out for it. A rational stopping point, a moment to reevaluate. Goggins reframes it. Failure isn't proof that he's weak, it's tuition. The cost of learning where his mind quits, where he negotiates, and where he still lies to himself. This is a subtle but powerful shift. If failure defines you, you will avoid it at all costs. If failure teaches you, you will seek it strategically. One mindset leads to stagnation, the other leads to growth, whether or not you succeed in the traditional sense. If you're listening to this and thinking, okay, this is uncomfortable because it's familiar, you're not alone. Drop a comment if any part of this feels uncomfortably accurate so far. That feedback actually helps shape what we cover next. Chapter 7. The Cookie Jar, or How to Use Your Past Without Letting It Ruin You. At some point in his training and later endurance events, Goggins runs into a problem that pure toughness cannot solve. He hits moments where his body is wrecked, his mind is screaming to stop, and no amount of logic or positive thinking is going to help. This is where most people quit. Not because they are weak, but because they have nothing left to draw from. Goggins realizes he needs a mental backup system. That is where the cookie jar comes in. The cookie jar is not nostalgia. It is not self-comfort. It is not replaying your greatest hits to feel good about yourself. It is a deliberate mental inventory of every hard thing you have already survived. Every time you did not quit. Every time you endured something that once felt impossible. Every time life hit you hard and you kept moving anyway. When things get brutal, Goggins mentally reaches into that jar and pulls out proof. Proof that he has suffered before and lived through it. Proof that he is not fragile. Proof that this moment, however miserable, is not new territory. Here is why this works. Pain feels overwhelming when it feels unique. When your brain believes this is the hardest thing you have ever faced. The cookie jar breaks that illusion. It reframes the present moment as just another chapter in a longer story of endurance. This is important because most people do the opposite. They selectively remember their failures, their embarrassments, their lowest points, and then they act surprised when they feel weak under pressure. Goggins flips that habit. He weaponizes memory instead of letting it sabotage him. Quick reality check here. If someone asked you right now to list 10 moments where you did something hard and did not quit, could you do it without hesitation? Or does your brain immediately jump to everything you have not done yet? That difference matters more than most people realize. Chapter 8. The 40% Rule, Explained Without the Hype. You have probably heard this quote by now. When you think you are done, you are only at 40%. People love this line. They put it on thumbnails, they shout it during workouts, they also misunderstand it constantly. Goggins is not saying you should ignore injury, reality, or common sense. He is not claiming the human body has infinite capacity. He is talking about perception, not physics. Your brain is designed to keep you alive, not to help you reach your potential. The moment something feels uncomfortable, it starts sending signals to stop. Fatigue, pain, doubt, negotiation. Most people treat those signals like emergency alarms. Goggins learned to treat them like early warnings, not final verdicts. Through repeated exposure to discomfort, he discovered that what felt like total exhaustion was often just the beginning of real effort. Not always, not in every situation, but far more often than we admit. The real skill here is learning to ask one question in the moment. Is this actual danger or is this discomfort? Most of the time, especially in modern life, it is discomfort. And discomfort is not a reason to stop. It is a reason to slow down, breathe, and continue deliberately. This applies far beyond physical challenges. Difficult conversations, boring work, learning a new skill, sitting with uncertainty instead of distracting yourself. Most people quit internally long before they quit externally. Goggins trained himself not to. Chapter 9. Taking souls and why the name distracts people. This is one of the most misunderstood ideas in the book, partly because the phrase itself sounds aggressive. Taking souls does not mean dominating others, humiliating people, or proving superiority. Goggins is very clear about this, even if the internet is not. Taking souls means something much quieter. It means showing up when others do not. It means staying calm when things get hard. It means continuing to work when excuses would be socially acceptable. When you do this consistently, something interesting happens. You stop needing validation. You stop explaining yourself. You stop caring who notices. And ironically, people do notice. Not because you say anything, but because discipline is disruptive. It exposes the gap between intention and action without saying a word. Goggins describes moments during training and races where others mentally quit long before their bodies failed. Not because they were weak, but because they had never trained themselves to stay present inside discomfort. He did. And that presence creates a kind of psychological gravity. It changes how you carry yourself, how you respond to stress, how much power excuses have over you. This is not about comparison. It is about internal standards. Chapter 10. Suffering is not the point. Growth is. This is where the book often gets mischaracterized. People hear Goggins talk about pain and assume the message is that suffering itself is virtuous, that the goal is to be miserable as often as possible. That is not what he is saying. Suffering is a tool, not an identity. Goggins does not chase pain randomly. He uses it strategically to strip away weakness, complacency, and self-deception. Once those are gone, suffering loses its central role. The problem is that most people never reach that stage because they quit at the first sign of discomfort and then call it balance. Which brings us to one of Goggins' most controversial positions. Chapter 11. Why Goggins rejects balance. Balance sounds reasonable. It sounds mature. It sounds healthy. Goggins hates it. Not because rest is bad, but because balance is often used as a polite excuse to avoid commitment, to stay mediocre while feeling virtuous about it. He noticed something uncomfortable about himself and others. Whenever he talked about balance, it was usually right before quitting, right before backing off a goal, right before lowering the standard to something more comfortable. So he removed the concept entirely. Instead of balance, he chose seasons, periods of extreme focus followed by recovery, intensity followed by rest, but never negotiated in the moment. This matters because decisions made under fatigue are almost always self-serving. Goggins learned to make his decisions ahead of time when his mind was clear. You do not decide whether to train when the alarm goes off. You decide the night before. You do not decide whether to finish when things get hard. You decide when you start. That is how discipline survives emotion. Chapter 12. Identity is built through action, not intention. As the book progresses, it becomes clear that Goggins is not trying to become disciplined. He is trying to become someone who does not quit. This is a subtle but crucial distinction. Most people want the identity first. They want to feel confident, motivated, disciplined, and then they plan to act accordingly. Goggins reverses the order. He acts first. The identity follows. Every hard thing he does becomes a brick. Over time, those bricks stack into a self-image that does not rely on mood, approval, or circumstance. This is why his confidence does not look like hype. It looks calm, almost boring. It is built on receipts. Quick check-in. If you are still here, that tells me something landed. If this feels useful, drop a like or a comment so I know to keep this style going. It genuinely helps shape future summaries. Chapter 13. Endurance stops being something you do and becomes who you are. By this point in the book, something important has shifted. Goggins is no longer chasing a single goal. It's not about becoming a SEAL anymore. It's not about finishing one race or proving one point or silencing one internal critic. Endurance becomes his identity. This is subtle, but it matters. Most people treat hard things like temporary projects. You suffer for a while, get the result, and then relax back into who you were before. Goggins does the opposite. He lets repeated suffering permanently change how he sees himself. He no longer asks, "Can I do this?" He asks, "What's required?" That shift removes drama from difficulty. Pain stops being personal. It's just part of the process. This is why he keeps escalating his challenges. Ultramarathons, multiple races back to back, events that sound less like fitness goals and more like medical warnings. Not because he needs more proof, but because comfort threatens his identity. The moment things feel easy, he knows he's at risk of slipping back into old habits. This is where people start to feel uneasy about his approach. And honestly, that discomfort is reasonable. Chapter 14, The Cost of Becoming Unbreakable. Here's the part most summaries gloss over. Goggins' way of living is effective, but it is not free. His body pays for it. Long-term injuries, physical wear that never fully goes away. He openly admits that many of his decisions were extreme, and in hindsight, not always smart. His personal relationships suffer at times. When your internal standard is relentless, it can be difficult to coexist with people who value comfort, balance, or flexibility. Not because they are wrong, but because your operating systems don't match. This is important to say out loud. Goggins is not presenting a lifestyle template for everyone. He is presenting a philosophy taken to its logical extreme. And that's actually part of what makes the book useful. Because it forces you to ask a better question than, should I live like this? The better question is, where am I lying to myself about my limits? You don't need to become an ultramarathon runner to benefit from this book. You just need to stop using comfort as your default decision maker. Chapter 15. Why comfort is more dangerous than pain. One of Goggins' most uncomfortable insights is that pain is honest, but comfort lies. Pain tells you exactly where you are. Comfort tells you everything is fine when it isn't. Comfort says you deserve a break when you haven't earned one. Comfort says tomorrow will be better without changing anything today. Comfort says this is just who I am when that identity is optional. Goggins believes that modern life is engineered to dull us. Food, entertainment, convenience, distraction. None of these are bad on their own, but together they create a constant escape hatch from discomfort. And if you always have an escape hatch, you never adapt. This is why he keeps deliberately putting himself in situations with no easy exit. Long races, cold environments, brutal training sessions. They remove the option to negotiate. You don't grow because it's hard. You grow because you stop running from hard. Chapter 16. Standards, not motivation. If there is one idea that quietly underpins the entire book, it's this. Goggins does not rely on motivation. He relies on standards. Motivation changes daily. Standards don't. He doesn't ask, do I feel like training today? He asks, what does the standard require? This is why his discipline looks so boring from the outside. There's no emotional buildup, no inner pep talk, just execution. Most people think they lack motivation when what they really lack is clarity. They haven't decided what kind of person they are willing to be when things get inconvenient. Once that decision is made, the daily choices become simpler, even if they're not easier. Ask yourself this honestly. Do you have goals or do you have standards? Goals are optional. Standards are not. Chapter 17. Self-respect is built, not felt. A quiet theme that runs through the book is self-respect. Goggins does not talk about self-love the way modern self-help does. He doesn't believe you gain self-respect by affirming it into existence. You earn it. Every time you do what you said you would do, even when it's inconvenient, you deposit a little trust into yourself. Every time you quit early or negotiate your standards downward, you withdraw from that account. Over time, the balance shows. This is why discipline feels good in retrospect but awful in the moment. You are trading short-term comfort for long-term trust in yourself. And once you have that trust, external validation loses its grip. You don't need praise as badly. You don't crumble under criticism as easily. You know who you are because you've tested it. Chapter 18. Applying the lessons without becoming extreme. This part matters, especially if you're listening and thinking, I get the message, but I don't want to destroy my body or alienate everyone in my life. That's fair. You don't need to copy Goggins' actions to apply his principles. Start smaller. Choose one area of your life where comfort has been running the show. Just one. Maybe it's your health. Maybe it's your work. Maybe it's avoiding a conversation you should have had months ago. Set a standard that is slightly uncomfortable, but realistic. Then keep it, especially on days when it feels pointless. That's how the callus forms. Not through heroics, through consistency. Chapter 19. The biggest misunderstanding about Goggins. By the time people finish Can't Hurt Me, they usually split into two camps. One group treats Goggins like a prophet. Everything he says is truth. Suffering is sacred, comfort is evil, balance is weakness. The other group dismisses him entirely. Too extreme, too unhealthy, too unrealistic for normal life. Both sides miss the point. Goggins is not asking you to copy his life. He is asking you to confront your own standards. His extremity exists to expose how much slack most people quietly build into their lives without realizing it. You don't need to run 100 miles. You don't need to train through broken bones. You don't need to live in constant intensity. But you do need to ask yourself where you've been negotiating with your potential and calling it self-care. That's the uncomfortable mirror this book holds up. Chapter 20. Where this philosophy can go wrong. To be fair, there are real criticisms of Goggins' approach, and they're worth acknowledging. Taken too far, relentless self-discipline can become self-punishment. It can turn into a way of avoiding emotional work rather than doing it. Pain can become an identity instead of a tool. Goggins himself admits this in later reflections. He pushed through injuries he shouldn't have. He ignored signals that mattered. He sometimes confused toughness with wisdom. This is why context matters. Discipline without reflection becomes obsession. Suffering without purpose becomes damage. The lesson here is not never rest. The lesson is don't let rest become avoidance. If you use balance to recover intentionally, that's strength. If you use balance to escape effort, that's comfort wearing a nice outfit. The difference is honesty. Chapter 21. The real core of the book. Strip away the intensity, the military framing, the extreme endurance feats, and what's left is surprisingly simple. Goggins believes most people live far below their actual capacity because they stop at the first serious sign of discomfort. Not because they are weak, but because they've never practiced staying present inside difficulty. So, the core message becomes this. You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your standards. If your standard allows quitting when things get hard, you will quit. If your standard demands follow through, you will find a way. And the only way to build that standard is through action. Repeated, boring, unglamorous action. Not motivation, not inspiration, not intention. Receipts. Chapter 22. How to actually use this without burning out. Here's the grounded way to apply Can't Hurt Me without turning your life into a constant stress test. Pick one area where you know you've been soft with yourself. Not everything, just one. Set a clear, non-negotiable standard, something measurable, something slightly uncomfortable. Then remove daily decision-making from it. You don't ask yourself whether to do it. You already decided. Some days you'll do it well. Some days you'll barely meet the standard. That's fine. What matters is that you don't negotiate with yourself in the moment. That's how self-trust gets built. Once that area stabilizes, you can expand. Slowly, intentionally, without drama. That's discipline that lasts. Chapter 23. Why this book sticks with people. Can't Hurt Me doesn't stick because of the stories. It sticks because it removes plausible deniability. After reading it, it becomes harder to pretend you don't know why things aren't changing. Harder to blame circumstances entirely. Harder to convince yourself that comfort is neutral. And that's uncomfortable, but it's also empowering. Because if you are the reason things stalled, you're also the one who can restart them. Conclusion. David Goggins is not a role model you're meant to imitate. He's a stress test. He shows what's possible when excuses are removed and standards are enforced without negotiation. You don't need to live like him, but you probably need less comfort than you think. And if there's one takeaway worth keeping, it's this. Confidence is not something you feel your way into. It's something you build by keeping promises to yourself, especially when no one is watching. That's the real meaning of Can't Hurt Me. If this summary gave you something useful, do the algorithmic thing. Like the video, subscribe, and let me know in the comments which book you want broken down next. That feedback genuinely drives what we cover here.